I've got 2 words for you that'll make anybody who overthinks fiction shudder, and those are alternate history. You like it, I like it, hell, I even subscribe to Alternate History Hub, and that's not just because he talks about the Transformers.
I'm an inventor. How about this one? I call it bold and bright. More like belongs in the trash!
Alternate history might be a minefield of tropes, historical inaccuracies, and misconceptions, but it's a great way to explore different ideas and concepts through an interesting lens. And one of the best ways to look through that lens without plowing through a library of Harry Turtledove is through the magical, mystical medium of video games. But what if you're a red-blooded American and you put that video game in your PS4 and realize it's communist propaganda? Bioshock is one of my favorite games of all time ever, and much like any good alt history scenario, it says, look at this anachronistic thing. Isn't that neat? Now survive it. From there, you build a narrative, insert thematic elements, and bing bang boom, you've got an instant classic. Except, I didn't finish that thought. Bioshock Infinite is one of my favorite games of all time, ever. I love this game, flaws and all. Anytime they release it, I buy it again. It's like my White Album. And I was pretty heartbroken to hear that any hopes for an anthology-style sequel were killed when Irrational Games was also killed by 2K. So what's a real pro gamer to do? Play Assassin's Creed? Well, I like the series, but honestly, ever since Ezio went off to that big Olive Garden in the sky, it just hasn't been the same. I had some really high hopes for We Happy Few when that was first announced. I mean, the really oppressive mod goth aesthetic spoke to me, especially as somebody who dresses like Austin Powers on the reg, but that game shit the bed as soon as a Kickstarter was announced. I guess there'll never ever be another game like Bioshock ever again. Wait a minute, what's this mid-century constructivist Atomic Age game? Atomic Heart? What's a Mundfish?
Man is here kneaded and cut, and to the sound of the chisel strokes of the Dionysian world artist rings out the cry of the Eleusinian mysteries. Do you prostrate yourselves, millions? Do you sense your maker, world? Welcome to the Pleasure Drome.
Alright, so first things first, I'm not going to delve into the controversy surrounding this game. The war in Ukraine is complicated, to say the least, and I didn't go to school for geopolitics, I went to school for heterodox economic theory. So while I won't address that, what I will say is a game about a Russian communist futuristic utopia created by Russians for Russians did raise a little bit of a red flag, and as somebody raised by children of the Cold War, I don't trust commies, but this game did look like it could match the Bioshock rhythm, so I gave it a chance.
Must crush capitalism.
The year is 1955. You begin the game reclining on a very relaxing gondola ride, appreciating the sights and sounds of the city Cholome, a flying testament to Soviet engineering and science. This flying city was a technological accomplishment achieved through the collaborative work of multiple scientists and engineers, but one stands above the rest. The city's overseer and director of enterprise for the Soviet Union, Dr. Dmitry Sekhenov. Dr. Sekhenov is the USSR's premier creative force and a genius who first earned recognition at the twilight hours of World War II by introducing the world to military automata. At the conclusion of World War II, Germany unleashed a horrific biological superweapon that crippled the majority of the world but left the USSR wounded but standing. Through a little bit of hard work, determination, and super science, this notoriously resource-poor and agrarian nation was able to pull itself up by its bootstraps, not only advancing robotics and engineering by decades, but becoming such a premier superpower that it surpassed the United States by the early 1950s. Due in large part to the works of Dr. Sekhenov, the Soviet Union is now the world's premier superpower, with a large population of automata helping its citizens. And in addition to that, Sekhenov has introduced a new miracle resource, polymer, and I gotta say, with all of these factors, we are building up to a full alternate history bingo here. For simplicity's sake, polymer and neuropolymer are essentially resources that can do anything the plot needs it to, not unlike Energon in the Transformers, or Megalon from the greatest movie ever made, Megaopolis, or, more accurately, Adam from the original Bioshock. Atomic Heart very plainly wears its influences on its sleeve, and that's not a bad thing, it's just worth pointing out. Now, your gondola ride is interrupted by a call from your boss, Dr. Sekhanov. Would you kindly meet him in his office for a little chat? As you work your way there, you get to admire the sights and sounds of Chalme. The city's in the midst of celebration as Dr. Sekhanov is unveiling his latest and greatest accomplishment, the Collective 2, an interconnected network that will unite man and machine. This is a hugely ambitious undertaking, especially for 1955, and it brings into question the moral implications of transhumanism, the ethics of integrating machinery completely into normal everyday life, and whether or not machinery will outstrip humanity's capacity for it. All things that would keep a normal man awake at night, unless, of course, you're P3, in which case you've got better things to do than ponder life, the universe, and everything. Such as, we see the world through the eyes of our player character, P3, or Sergei to his friends, a military specialist and amnesiac goon under the employ of the good Dr. Sekhanov. Joining you on this bizarre adventure is the AI Charles, or Charles as I'm going to call him because I'm an American and I speak American. That's also a blanket excuse for all the mispronunciation in this video. Functionally speaking, Charles is there to give you in-game hints, tips and tricks, expand and exposit upon in-game lore dumps, and essentially just give P3 someone to talk to, and boy howdy does P3 talk a lot.
I've marked another waypoint for ease of navigation.
How dense do you think I am? I know where I need to go to complete my mission.
I was only trying to make things easier for you.
You can make things easier by getting off my grill.
There's silent protagonists like Jack or the original hacker from System Shock, sardonic types like Booker who make a few comments here and there, and then there's total smartasses like P3.
There are robots beneath us.
Really? I thought they were ladybugs.
P3, no matter the situation, always has some sarcastic quip or comment tucked away in his back pocket, ready at a moment's notice. He's very obtuse, obstinate, and almost oblivious to the situations around him, and the only person spared from his vitriol is Dr. Sekhanov. Maybe some of this works better in the original Russian, but honestly, I ain't playing a game in Russian. Despite all this, there is just enough under the surface that makes P3 a tolerable protagonist, though almost all of those revelations come at the very end of the game. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. We're still working through all the celebrations and festivals on Chalme, and there is some great tension built up here. As the closer and closer you get to your goal, the more and more of the jubilation and festivities fade away. This all comes to a head as we reach our goal, a massive, beautiful, brutalist, and constructivist tower dedicated to science and industry. This is some great visual storytelling here. Not only does Chalme already exist separate from and above the Soviet Union, but Dr. Sekhanov himself looms large above the city he commands. While Dr. Sekhanov is more amicable than Andrew Ryan or Zachary Comstock, he is just as much of an oligarch. Even though this is the Soviet collective where everyone's equal, some are more equal than others. This separation and disconnect is emphasized once you reach his office proper. Even though you've had very casual conversation with him throughout the comm system, you never talk to Sekhanov face to face. Once you enter his office, you are stopped at the door by his Ballerina twins. The Ballerina twins immediately stand out and demand your attention as they juxtapose all the other robots you've encountered so far. They are captivatingly curvaceous and beautifully crafted. However, there is an air of menace that surrounds them. Despite the alluring androids, the glamorous setting, and the erudite persona of Dr. Sekhanov, there is something wrong here. P3 doesn't notice it because this is business as usual to him, but the player does. The player knows better. It's a detail so subtle you don't even notice.
But your brain did.
Anyway, despite not talking to Dr. Sekhanov directly, the Ballarinas give you the task and means of going to the research station below the floating city to take care of something or someone. Again, this gives the player the idea that there's something wrong here, something a little dystopic. P3 treats this as business as usual, so much so you aren't 100% privy to the actual goal of the mission, just that this isn't the first time this dog's been told to hunt. So you grab the key, grab a car, and a friendly little drone called a Bumblebee is going to fly you down to the facility, which I think is in modern-day Kazakhstan. You appreciate the surroundings, get some lore dumps from the radio, and have a quick conversation with Charles. Even though a plane could fly you down, The bumblebees are actually how the original scientists got back and forth from the city back in the day, so it's kind of a tradition. It's cute how Charles knows all these things about how the city was founded and how the scientists operated back in the day, but I'm sure that won't affect anything. Everything's looking peachy keen, but this little joyride doesn't last long, as your bumblebee is shot down in flames. Rest in peace, little guy, and you crash into one of the neighboring research facilities. All the robots are going berserk, auto-berserk even. And one little friendly ladybot is going to help you out, but she doesn't last long, and you crash into the ground as you try to escape the carnage. You get a call from your boss, Dr. Sekhanov. The launch of Collective 2 has hit an SNAG snag, as the former research head, Viktor Pietrov, has gone off the deep end. He's gone off the res and reprogrammed all the robots to become killbots, plunging the Soviet Union into a full robot apocalypse. And look at that, that's one full alternate history bingo right there. Your new mission, find Pietrov, find the deactivation codes in the robot apocalypse, and go full Butlerian jihad on his ass. And make it snappy, because the Kremlin's pretty pissed about this entire situation. Hey, why do all these service industry and utilitarian robots have a combat mode anyway? Whatever.
Back, you robot! Nobody ruins my family vacation but me! And maybe the boy!
From this point on, this is where the game proper actually begins. It's much more akin to Bioshock Infinite than it is Bioshock. It's all action all the time. You're not picking up the pieces, looking at the carnage and horror that's been wrought upon people. You are actively the carnage and horror, making you part of the problem. I mean, part of the solution. This middle segment of the game is the thickest part of it. This is where all the minutia lies, as this is where the actual game lies. And the game is fun, and it's interesting in my opinion, but really I'm here for the story elements. So we're gonna yada 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 through most of it, as it really consists of going from research station to research station, trying to hunt down Victor and meeting your eclectic cast of characters. While we are here for lore and story more than anything else, I will talk about the gameplay mechanics, if only for a little bit, just so that everybody's familiar with it. If you've played any modern survival horror over the past 10 years or so, then you're familiar with everything that's going on here. It's derivative of the new Resident Evil games, and of course, Bioshock. You can run and gun if you really want to, but you should focus on melee so you can conserve resources. You can craft items by scavenging through things and digging through garbage cans, and of course you have a little bit of extra spice with your neuropolymers, special abilities akin to plasmids or vigors. There's nothing really groundbreaking with the polymers. They're exactly what you expect. You even start the game with a basic electroshock bolt, but they are pretty useful, especially when you get swarmed by enemies, specifically mass telekinesis. Level this one up fast, as you can start raining mass death on your opponents. You unlock new abilities and level up your character by harvesting neuropolymer from fallen enemies. You don't have any silver eagles or rubles. For all intents and purposes, polymers are your main currency. There isn't any vending machines that offer food or supplies. You have to craft that or scavenge it yourself. And in order to level up and craft new items, you have to go to Nora, a super horny, sexed up hedonism bot that's the game's vending machine. She's literally there at all the save states so you can go craft new items. I hope you like sex jokes, because you gotta talk to her often. But even more so than Charles, she is your ever-present companion throughout the game. She's always got your back, and she even tells you to be wary of Charles on occasion, but I don't know. She's crazy. Why would she say that?
I can't wait for your strong hands to grope my interface with lustful abandon.
That's it. We're done here.
Now that's out of the way, let's talk about the Kazakhstan research facility, since that's where you're going to be spending most of your time. It's a pretty large map with a lot of research pavilions, installations, and underground facilities dotted throughout. The various research installations you encounter and have to dive through are interesting in the context of the game, but I don't think they're anywhere near as charismatic as the different pavilions and levels you go through in Rapture. While there are bodies and audio diaries littered throughout the research facility, they're nowhere near as rich as the ones you'd find in Bioshock and System Shock. In Bioshock especially, all of these are part of the rich environmental storytelling that Rapture has. Finding all these bodies isn't just gore for the sake of gore, you're really seeing the downfall of a society. Really, the blood, guts, and viscera wrought by the robot apocalypse are there for set dressing. The real environmental storytelling comes from the bizarre experiments that you encounter in the research stations. Throughout your adventure, you encounter tons and tons of unbridled, unrestrained, unethical, fucked up, crackpot experiments conducted by the scientists here. This reminds me of the quite literal layers of unregulated experiments conducted by Aperture Science in the Portal series, though it's a lot less charismatic in my opinion. Atomic Heart, while somewhat tongue-in-cheek, is very grim and very serious at times, whereas Portal is deeply, deeply silly, especially when you have Cave Johnson chattering in your ear about moon rocks, mantis men, and how science isn't about whys, it's about why nots.
Lab boys say the symptoms of asbestos poisoning show a median latency of 44.6 years. So if you're 30 or older, you're laughing. Worst case scenario, you miss out on a few rounds of canasta. Plus, you forwarded the cause of science by 3 centuries. I punch those numbers into my calculator, it makes a happy face.
This is where P3 gets a little shaken up. He's very much convinced that all of this unregulated, horrific scientific experimentation couldn't have been conducted under Dr. Sekinov's supervision, but you and me both know that's not true. Especially when you have to contend with hordes of zombies. I mean, the T-virus doesn't just happen by accident. And we also learned that there's some sort of horrific secret to the polymer and neuropolymer, especially since we got to see a whole bunch of cows, chickens, and pigs get slurried up and turned into a 7-Eleven slushie for it. There's your new ad, PETA. Though, you know, I wouldn't give them too much credit, considering there's some geese in here that are super mean and beat the shit out of you. Also, we lost track of Viktor Pietrov because, you know, he faked his own death. Anyway, basically, outside of the major plot beats, a majority of the rhythm that you find in this middle section is you find something messed up, Charles or a different NPC tells you there's more to this than meets the eye, P3 goes, nuh-uh, and Charles goes, yeah-huh. Rinse and repeat. So, you know what? Let's talk about some of those NPCs.
Who are you people?
First weirdo you encounter is Granny Zinnia, a well-armed hermit that seems very out of place in the facility and seems to have eyes and ears everywhere. She knows things aren't on the up and up in the facility and also has a direct feed to Moscow. That's how you know that the Kremlin's really putting pressure on Sekhenov for this incident. She's also extremely prickly towards P3, but I doubt that's plot relevant. He doesn't seem to think so. You also encounter Larissa Filatova, a neurosurgeon and researcher that you find aiding stabbing robot victims. She's presented as an ally at first, but you find out very quickly not only is she lovers with, but a collaborator of Viktor Pietrov. Later on, you realize that even though they have the same goal of stopping the Collective 2, she wasn't aware that Viktor had activated all the killbots. See, this is why honesty is always important in a relationship, especially if you're gonna incite the apocalypse. None of this is really helping P3. He's having a rough time of things. Making things worse are 2 ancillary characters, Michael Stockhausen and Igor Molotov. Stockhausen is a habitual shit-stirrer and scientist that the Soviet Union scooped up after World War II. Don't ask what he was doing in Germany during the 40s. Despite this, he is one of Dr. Sekhenov's most trusted associates, so much so that he deals with the political fallout of the situation. Because of an unscheduled robot apocalypse, Dr. Sekhenov, and by extension Michael Stockhausen, and by extension you, are left dealing with Igor Molotov, a bureaucrat and member of the Soviet Council of Ministers, and he's looking to put a boot up someone's ass for this unprecedented disaster. Shit rolls downhill. Amongst all of this, P3's old war wounds and undiagnosed head trauma really start acting up, so much so that he actually blacks out in the middle of trying to protect Molotov from some unseen threat. He falls to the ground and goes to some sort of fantasy realm. No, P3 didn't get isekai'd, this is just his head safe space. This fantasy realm is called Limbo, but honestly we're gonna table this for right now and save it until the endgame, because that's really when it becomes relevant. P3 wakes up from his nightmare and finds himself covered in blood. That's probably not good, but don't worry about it, it's not your blood. Sekhenov and Stockhausen get you back up on your feet and let you know that Molotov and his KGB escort were probably killed by robots while you blacked out. I don't know how you survived, but thank God you did, because we gotta get rid of these bodies. It's a really bad look. Oh hey look, the Ballerina twins are here, and oh hey, get a good look at them Ballerina twins. So we enter a pretty prolonged cutscene where they, actually, I really don't know what they're doing, but it does remind me, before the release of the game, somebody online spread the rumor that there was going to be a 6-hour-long sex scene between the Ballerina twins and the player character. I don't know who started this rumor, because it certainly wasn't Mundfish, but they took it and ran, because that is some insane publicity right there. That is full Sting tantric levels of cutscene. He can cutscene for up to 9 hours. Who even wants a 6-hour cutscene of anything, though, especially in this modern age? This isn't an FMV game from the 90s. Phantasmagoria 2 didn't even try to do that.
Hey, rat girl.
I don't suppose you know what the hell's going on, huh?
Isn't it obvious? You're a psycho killer.
All that game had was BDSM, office politics, and a blob monster. Anyway, the BDSM robots awaken a blob monster, and it turns Minister Molotov into a skeleton. Okay, there's a little bit more to it than that. The red blob monster is red neuropolymer. This was a substance created by one of Dr. Sekhanov's associates, Dr. Charlton Zakharov, a scientist who went missing under mysterious circumstances prior to the game's events. The red neuropolymer not only disposes of bodies very conveniently, but it also absorbs their memories, their thoughts, and any information that they had, making it a very valuable resource. However, this little meeting is cut short, as Dr. Sekhanov discovers somebody is trying to contact the United States of America.
Nobody needs America's help until they need it. Bang, no tunes!
The only person who could possibly do that in the middle of all of this fracas is Viktor Pietrov. That's right, I didn't bury the lead. He really did fake his death and escape. Dr. Sekhanov sends out the twins to escort Michael Stockhausen around because, well, he gets into trouble real fast, and then he tells you, would you kindly find Viktor Pietrov? So we're back to killing hordes and hordes and hordes of robots, and the occasional zombie. Well, since we're here knee-deep in nuts and bolts, we might as well talk about the robots.
Whenever a fire alarm is pulled, it's Robot House. Whenever the campus liquor store is looted, Robot House. Whenever a human corpse is desecrated.
Now I can explain that.
That's enough out of you.
One of the things I really appreciate about Atomic Heart's mid-century modern aesthetic is how it approaches its robot designs. Almost all of the little mechanoids you encounter in-game are very practical and utilitarian. Whether it's a cannon fodder robot or a boss monster, they're very pragmatic. A little chunky and a little clunky, but all the little details on them inform you of their role before going kill crazy. For example, the Rotobots might be nightmare hellstorms of knives and violence, but they were clearly made for agrarian work, harvesting grain and produce. The big Barov worms wrecking up the place are meant for excavation and mining. And of course, the big roly-poly hedgies are meant for land surveillance. Even the adorable buzzsaw-toting laborer bots have a distinct purpose. Clearly they're meant to clear lumber and debris, so it all makes sense. Everything has a purpose, but that sensibility starts slipping away when you start looking at the android column. The first and foremost that you meet are the lab technicians, or as I like to call them, the mustache men. The lab techs before the robot apocalypse were just that, research assistants for the scientists in the Kazakhstan facility. The only reason they have silly mustaches is because in-universe the android designers decided they needed something humanizing so that the people working with the robots wouldn't get creeped out. The next type is the Tereshkovas. These girls are a little strange and more than a little goofy, but they're also some of the few friendly faces in the facility. This is because they're not connected to the collective system. They are independent. I think the best way to think about these androids is if the mustache men work back of the house, then the Tereshkovas are front of the house. They are customer service. They're retail ready, they're upbeat and chipper, and they're even programmed to have an overly positive attitude. It's a little uncanny, but you know they're earnest. As silly as it sounds, the Tereshkovas feel much more grounded in the other robots in the facility. They almost feel like animatronics from some horrific Soviet Disneyland, so I almost feel like they're the most realistic in the grand scheme of things. Finally, the most important class of android, or at least the most important class for the sake of this video, is the Ballerina type. These are few and far between, but you've already met two. Dr. Sekhanov's android bodyguards, left and right. You know, I bet that naming convention means something, but I just can't place it. Now, the Ballarinas are captivating, they're eye-catching, they're distinct with the stark gold and gray motif. So distinct, I think we should compare them to the aforementioned Tereshkovas. After all, they're both gynoids, so it's not unfounded. The Tereshkovas, while very feminine, do look like an animatronic meant to curate exhibits, whereas the Ballerinas are much more exaggerated. They emphasize the female form and look like finely crafted and sculpted pieces of art, much more akin to a sculpture than a robot. The division between the Ballerina androids and the other types of robots you've encountered in-game is emphasized even further when you reach one of the penultimate levels of the research facility. You've finally been able to track down Viktor Pietrov to his old stomping grounds, the Maya Plisetska Memorial Theater, and this is where you encounter the Ballerina type in her natural environment. Now, they are allegedly meant to forward the causes of art and culture. However, the Ballerinas don't act like any of the other robots you've encountered. They don't even act like Dr. Sekhanov's Ballerina twins. Instead of hunting you, harming you, or aiding you, all of the ballerinas you encounter are completely static. They're perfectly poised on pedestals and lit like statues. There's no getting around it. They are very sexualized and quite literally objectified for the male gaze. A point emphasized even further by a conversation you have with Charles.
Say, are the ballerinas here? Just ballerinas.
The topic of robosexuality is extremely popular among the Soviet elite. Robosexual lobbies have become quite powerful. And it would seem that the sale of related services is flourishing at the theater. In other words, no. The ballerinas are not just ballerinas.
The revelations of the sexy ballerinas really haven't helped P3 in his bizarre adventure. There's only so many puzzles you can solve that way, but they have got the gears turning in that head of his. He's asking way too many questions now.
Do you think the boss knows about this?
What do you think?
Well, given the robots he's chosen as bodyguards, guess he's a robosexual himself.
It's the end of the road. Viktor Pietrov is cornered by P3 on the main ballet stage. Now, to be fair, Viktor is also having a really shitty day. He did start the robot apocalypse, but it was for a good reason. The collective program is dangerous. Dr. Sekhanov is dangerous, but P3, the loyal lapdog he is too damn dense to realize it. And I mean, yeah, P3 is actually really fucking dense. And on top of that, his girlfriend, Larissa Filatova, dumped his ass due to all the carnage and horror he caused. At least that's what she said. I think it's because she found out he was going to dress like the Joker, and that's not a gag. Munfish actually had concept art of that. During his ravings, Viktor tells P3 that Dr. Sekhanov's been lying to him about the entire situation. Viktor didn't reprogram the robots, that's too complicated. They already had a kill mode installed. The fix was in, all he had to do was flip the switch. As he spirals further down into a full mental breakdown, he tells P3 that the collective will rob humanity of its free will, and throws P3 a pair of enigmatic rings. As P3 tries to approach him, Viktor pulls a real pro-gamer move and rage quits.
Suicide is badass.
No.
Ah, well, shit. The one person who could turn off the killbots decided they really didn't want to. You contact Chalamet, and Dr. Sekhanov tells you that in a world of super science, death really isn't a dead end so much as it is a speed bump. Grab his head and we'll figure it out. You stash the head in your back pocket, and one tanky boss battle later, you leave the theater, and you get a few calls. Dr. Sekhanov asks, hey, P3, did Viktor have 2 rings on his person? That's a little weird. Then you get a call from Michael Stockhausen. Damn shame Viktor's dead, buddy, but hey, did you happen to see if he had 2 gold rings? Well, 2's a pattern, but 3's a third call. Granny Zinnia. Hey, P3, did you happen to find 2 gold rings? Well, P3 tells his boss is Major Domo and the KGB spook, I've got no idea what you're talking about. What even is a ring? Is it magnetic? Is it spherical? P3's playing dumb because he doesn't trust anybody right now, not even the good Dr. Sekhanov. His faith in his boss is quite shaken after the events of the game. P3 knows he's being played by someone, he just doesn't know who. Luckily, he still has his good friend, the AI Charles, to confide in, and he would never steer P3 wrong. It's time to go meet up with Michael Stockhausen. He has the means and ability to remove the information from Viktor Pietrov's head using a little bit of that fine red neuropolymer, and you should probably get a move on there, P3. This thing's starting to get room temp, and I don't think it's supposed to get warm. You deliver the head to Michael Stockhausen and his ballerina escort, and they begin the process of extracting the info. Stockhausen waxes on about how he and Viktor used to be friends back in the day, but they went down different paths, and a girl got in the way, and blah blah blah. Filatova bum rushes everybody and tells Stockhausen to get his grubby schnitzel-covered hands off the head. She throws a grenade in the room and kills everybody instantly. Okay, not everybody. P3's fine. He's not fine. He's got another concussion, but honestly, I don't think that's going to hurt at this point.
I'm telling you, the light would work better if it pointed out to sea. Dar, shut up. I know what I'm doing. Dar, I hate the sea and everything in it.
Now, they did get all the information out of Pietrov's head before the explosion. It's just going to take a little bit of time to process. Filatova gives you a call. The grenade wasn't meant to kill you, it was just meant to grab your attention, which, I mean, mission accomplished. She gives you the same rundown that Pietrov did, just less crazed. The Collective 2 is dangerous, Sekhenov has ulterior motives, and you are being played, but more importantly, she punctuates that with, she has proof. Come to the Ministry of Consequences and see it for yourself. The Ministry is located under a lighthouse. Wait a minute. A lighthouse? A man? A city? Oh no, this really is a Bioshock game. With very few options left, P3 works his way down to the waterline. On the way, Charles tells him all about the rings. You see, there are 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 rings for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 rings for mortal men doomed to die, and then 2 rings created by Dr. Sekhenov that will make them immune from the effects of the Collective. If man and machine are united in the Soviet Union under the Collective program, that means there can be up to 2 rogue agents at play at any given time. That could be anyone. That could be the KGB, or that could be 2 robotic assassins. Charles tells you to cast these rings back into the fire from whence they were forged. They're too dangerous to be left in the hands of mortal men. It's crazy that Charles knows so much about the Collective program and everything surrounding it. On your way to the lighthouse, you're confronted with the robot from The Incredibles. That's a crossover I wasn't expecting. And upon defeating it, Charles once again reiterates, destroy the rings, and P3, browbeat and tired of the entire situation, throws them into the water. Well, that feels like a mistake, but there's no going back now. Enter the lighthouse and take the long elevator ride all the way down to the underwater city. We're just doubling up on Bioshock here. It's not actually an underwater city, it's another research facility, but, you know, they do call it a rapture. You meet Filatova and the Ministry of Consequences, and the revelations come hard and fast. Basically, this is where the video game just vomits plot points right in your lap. Alright, big old word salad time here. So the first revelation you find is that the Collective program is going to rob humanity of its free will and make them completely docile to whomever controls the Collective program, i.e. Dr. Sekhenov. Number 2, the Soviet Union had a long-term infiltration protocol at play. The Soviet Union would export a large number of service industry and labor automata to other nations. With the flick of a switch, they would enter combat mode and become an occupying army. There, they would hold strategic points within the United States and other nations, specifically nuclear programs and facilities. Thus, the name of the game and the program, Atomic Heart. And finally, the AI Charles is not what he seems. He is the reconstructed consciousness of the aforementioned Dr. Charlton Zakharov. You know what? I knew there was just something a little off about him the entire time. That's how he knew so much about, everything, actually. I guess P3 really is just that damn dense. Charles has been provoking P3 this entire time to get him out from under Sekhenov's grasp, and he's on a quest for revenge, as he implies Sekhenov is responsible for the mysterious accident that caused his original death. Though, it's a little funny, Filatova implies that, Charlton didn't really have too much of a care or concern for his body and started experimenting on himself, but I'm sure Charles is being honest, okay? He's been honest with us the entire time, after all. P3's still not 100% convinced, though. I mean, Sekhenov might have a couple literal skeletons in his closet, and the Collective might be mass brainwashing, but Sekhenov seems to have some good goals, and honestly, he doesn't understand how it affects him. The reason P3 doesn't understand is because he's missing a large chunk of his brain.
The wind may have stopped working, but my brain never does.
Rolling back the clock here, prior to the events of the game, P3 was part of a special Soviet military unit. This unit did dirty deeds for the Soviet Union, and during a mission, P3 was horrifically injured, leaving him catatonic and disabled. That is until the arrival of the good Dr. Sekhenov, who provided P3 with advanced prosthetics, as well as emotional and physical therapy. It just so happened that part of the therapy involved replacing parts of P3's damaged brain with neuropolymer, the effect being that somebody, implicated to be Sekhenov, can send P3 into a fugue state and remotely control him. P3 killed Minister Molotov at someone's request earlier in the game during his blackout, and Limbo is where his consciousness goes while he's catatonic. It's just whammy after whammy, and we're not done yet because I saved the best one for last, or at least in my opinion the most important one. It's actually what inspired me to make this entire video to begin with. It turns out the major hurdle in Dr. Sekhenov's reprogramming of P3's consciousness was his emotional attachment to his wife. That's right, not only is P3's life a lie, but he had a wife, and she's dead. The hits just keep on coming, but there's a little bit more to this one. You see, P3's wife, Ekaterina Nechayev, was also a combat specialist, and she was killed in the same accident that injured P3. Not one to waste good parts, Dr. Sekhenov was able to recover and salvage a good portion of P3, but Ekaterina was far, far, far away from recovery. In fact, I think it's implied that she might have been bisected, and the reason I say this is because Dr. Sekhenov was able to recover her brain, specifically the left and right hemispheres. While it's not stated directly in-game, you can infer that Dr. Sekhenov had some affinity towards Ekaterina. After all, he used her brain to continue his advancements in androids and robotics. The culmination of this research being 2 android ballerinas, his personal assistants and bodyguards always by his side. That's right, the android twins are what's left of your dead wife. This is a fantastic twist. That is not sarcasm, that's not irony. This is a great addition to the endgame. One of the things that I think makes the Bioshock style of game very distinct is the fact that there are horror elements to the enemies and mascot characters of the games. I don't just mean scary for the sake of scary, I mean something viscerally wrong underneath the surface. Shodan has achieved consciousness, and she is nothing but intrusive thoughts. The Mini are a parasitic hive mind, but are horrified by the fact that humanity is individualistic and believes it's helping by assimilating us. The Big Daddies and Little Sisters are the horrific results of continued exploitation within Rapture. The Big Daddies being unwilling test subjects grafted into metal suits, and the Little Sisters being orphans with their autonomy stolen from them and turned into literal resource gatherers. And then nobody knows what the hell Songbird is in Bioshock Infinite, other than there is something biological in there, and it has been broken down and conditioned so much that it's nothing but a guard dog for Elizabeth. And then there's the Ballerina twins, left and right, literally dehumanized objectifications of P3's one last true emotional attachment, kept as the personal playthings of the one man he was meant to trust, for all that implies. After all, Charles made sure to emphasize that the Ballerinas aren't just ballerinas. Is this fridging? Yes, and does it take away from what little character Ekaterina has? Yeah, more than a little bit, but for the sake of the story, it is a good plot beat and a good twist nonetheless. Tropes aren't inherently bad, it's how you use them. All of these revelations have made P3's day just that little extra bit shittier.
People are under a lot of stress, Bradley.
But he still wants to hear the truth from Sekhenov himself. Knowing that a direct confrontation with Sekhenov will probably end in violence, P3 and Filatova cook up a plan. The old Wookiee prisoner gambit. They're gonna bring her in and confront him there. This plan goes off the rails almost immediately. As soon as they're in the elevator together, getting out of the Ministry of Consequences, P3 blacks out. You awaken under the care of Granny Zinnia. It turns out she is your mother-in-law. That's why she's been a little prickly this entire time, and she informs you that not only has Dr. Sekhenov regained control of the robots, but Filatova is dead. You killed her in your fugue state. Awesome. And on top of that, the collective launch is about to begin. This is it. It's time to run the tables or go home empty-handed. And as the player, you actually get that choice. You can either confront Sekhenov or throw up your hands and walk away. If you decide to walk away, that leads to the Annihilation Instinct DLC, which we'll touch on later. But if you're a real gamer, you're gonna go all in. You gear up, you get ready, and Charles tells you, would you kindly go to Dr. Sekhenov's office and kill that son of a bitch. You enter the tower and you are immediately confronted by one of Dr. Sekhenov's android ballerinas, his first and last line of defense. In this ending, there are 2 boss fights, one where an individual ballerina confronts you, and one where you confront the ballerinas. The solo ballerina fight is somewhat interesting on an aesthetic level. Instead of attacking you with an athletic grace, that facade breaks away. The elegance is gone because she skitters around like a strange little insect or spider. It adds a creepy quality to her, and I like it quite a bit. Unfortunately, from a story perspective, I wish there was just a little bit more meat on the bone, just a little bit more there. After all, P3 is having to confront a horrific aberration of science based off of his dead wife. You'd think there'd be at least a little bit more of a reaction there. And It's a little inexplicable that you just fight one and there's no lasting effect throughout the game. It's not like the double act is affected at all. I think it would have been much more interesting if you had actually visibly damaged one of the ballerinas. You look at other robot, android, or masked characters, and when they get into a knockout, drag-out fight and get that asymmetrical damage, it looks super cool. As silly as it sounds, I see the mirrored visor on the android ballerina, and I want to know what all the mechanical details underneath look like. As P3 takes a closer look at the ballerina, she shudders back to life and bursts through the very literal glass ceiling above her, destroying a beautiful hammer and sickle motif that falls to the ground. I wonder if that's symbolic at all. You give chase, which is to say you take a very, very long elevator ride all the way to the top floor. This elevator would give Mass Effect a run for its money. Now, maybe I'm a little bit of a glutton for punishment when it comes to video games, but I think it would have been way cooler if you actually had to go the long way to Dr. Sekinov's office. That's right, Ghostbuster-style stairs. Okay, well, not exactly Ghostbuster-style. Just imagine if you actually had to siege the tower, like Dread or The Raid. This erudite tower has been immune to the carnage below, and now you're bringing it straight to Sekhenov. You could have gone about it a few different ways. You could have had full action where you have to clear out floors of robots or maybe even mad scientists at Sekhenov's beck and call. Or you could have even had a survival horror level where you have to sneak around one of the android ballerinas actively hunting you like Mr. X or Alcena Dimitrescu from the Resident Evil series. You finally confront Dr. Sekhenov in his office and you want to hear the truth, the whole truth, and he tells you that, yes, the Collective will steal humanity's free will, but that's a good thing. It'll take away all our petty differences and squabbles and finally unite us into one people, one society that can strive and achieve and even go to the stars. And P3 isn't hearing it. He wants to finish the fight. You get a quick time event where you get a very good view of the ballerina as she tries to stomp a mud hole in your ass. From this point on, the double act starts, and honestly, it's not as cool as the solo. I say that because, well, she was unique at the very beginning, whereas both of them together just kind of float around and throw stuff at you. This probably would have been too impractical to implement in-game, but the ballerinas are supposed to be based off the left and right hemispheres of the brain, so go further with the motif. One is the stealth boss, and one is pure, unrelenting brute strength. Would have been more interesting in my opinion. You've defeated the ballerinas, and it's just you, Sekhenov, and Charles. Turns out Charles hasn't been completely honest about the situation. He's been escalating things the entire time. Whenever P3 was sent into the fugue state, that wasn't Sekhenov. That was Charles. He was the one who had P3 kill Filatova and Molotov. As an AI neuropolymer construct, Charles has ascended above humanity, no longer concerned with our petty squabbles and the tangle of our lives. Instead, he's looking to assume direct control of the Collective.
Nice work by all.
P3's been played the entire time by both sides, and honestly, it's not as great of a revelation as Atlas Frank Fontaine. The original Bioshock really keyed into something. Irish accents are extremely trustworthy.
But I can't help falling in love with you, like the river flows.
Elvis is not so.
Elvis.
Okay, it sounds
God.
silly, but think about it real quick. The writing team for Bioshock wrote very grounded and relatable dialogue for Atlas, but the thing they kept facing is the fact that nobody trusted him, so they went through tons of voice actors, cadences, and dialects until they hit the Irish accent. The lyrical lilt to it is somewhat disarming, and it does give you a little bit of an everyman quality.
He died a hero. He was more than a hero. He was a Union man.
At no point during the gameplay of Atomic Heart did I trust Charles. He just knew a little too much about any given situation, and he just knew a little too much about all the dark secrets plaguing the facility in Chalamet. And of course I never trusted Dr. Sekhenov. He's the oligarch at the head of the insane super science city. No duh, he's evil. Michael Stockhausen was just looking out for numero uno, and Granny Xenia is a KGB spook, so of course I don't trust her. I mean, really, the only person you can trust is your dead wife. I mean, it's not like she's gonna steer you wrong, she's dead, and that's not a joke. She comes in spiritual flashes to you during the final boss fight to tell you, don't trust anybody. Thanks for the advice. I think we could use that a little earlier. After a short battle of wills and words, Sekhenov is shot dead. P3 falls catatonic, and Charles assumes direct control of the collective. And for all intents and purposes, that is where the base game ends. A little bit of a downer, and we wouldn't really get any kind of resolution until quite a while later with the DLC.
No need to explain. I too have known unconventional love.
Alright, so the first DLC actually follows the alternate path of the game. If you said, screw you guys, I'm going home, and decided to walk away from the situation, then you're part of the Annihilation Instinct. In the middle of taking his PTO, or paid time off if you will, P3 was abducted by Nora, the horny vending machine from earlier in the game, and she has taken him to the Mendeleev complex. P3 awakens under Nora's care. Nora is obsessed with the player character throughout the course of the game, and now she finally has her way with him. The Mendeleev complex was hit much harder by the robot apocalypse caused by Viktor Pietrov than the Kazakhstan facility you've already adventured through, so much so, by the time P3 wakes up, he finds that either everybody's long since dead or has abandoned the facility. Meanwhile, Nora has sunk her tentacles deep into the facility complex and has taken almost complete control over it. While Nora is completely obsessed with P3, he is able to escape her tentacly grasp for a little bit. She's actually patched in directly to his comm and AI system, so even though he's able to escape the underground living facilities, she's still with him. Ostensibly, Nora let P3 go because there are third parties trying to interfere with her machinations, and she's hoping P3 will take care of them for her. One of those third parties is Granny Xenia. She's more than a little pissed that P3 abandoned the situation and let Dr. Sekhenov launch the collective program, i.e. mass brainwashing. She wants to take control of the Mendeleev complex as it is a strategic point in a potential civil war between the Russian government and Sekhenov. The other interloper Nora wants you to take care of is the truly kindly Dr. Lebedev. Dr. Lebedev is actually the scientist who created Nora's AI construct, and he kind of feels responsible for her going off the rails and wants to fix the entire situation. Dr. Lebedev is as much of a crackpot as any of the other scientists you encounter in the base game, but he's not a bad guy. He doesn't want to take over the world, he's just in it for the love of the game. He loves science for the sake of science. Plus, he's got a pretty funny name that's fun to say. Lebedev. It's got a good rhythm to it. Anyway, once you meet Dr. Lebedev, he tasks P3 with turning off Nora in more ways than one. See, the entire Mendeleev complex is where she was created, and it's where her AI consciousness is stored. It's an entire computer facility dedicated to her. See, the reason everybody wants control of the facility is because the Nora AI network controls all of these vending machines, and they are all essentially little weapons manufacturing plants. Very convenient for arming a military force. Viktor Pietrov tried to take control of her back at the beginning of the base game, but screwed up so badly it turned her into the psychosexual refrigerator that you have to deal with now.
Especially you, hedonism bot!
I apologize for nothing!
See, Lebedev has all of these little BDs, that's what they're called. They're essentially personality cores that you can upload into Nora to help reset her program. The only problem is the BDs are goofy little robots running amok and causing nothing but trouble, so you gotta hunt them down throughout the entire Mendeleev facility and throw them in pneumatic tubes to get them into Nora's computer core. I think once you enter the Mendeleev complex proper, you start seeing a lot of influence from Portal and Portal 2. Obviously, the BDs are very reminiscent of the AI personality cores like Wheatley or the Space Core, but also the entire facility's aesthetic just reminds me so much of the old Aperture facilities that you encounter. The living facilities you explore at the very beginning of the DLC remind me quite a bit of the stasis units that Shell awakes in at the very beginning of Portal 2, with their chintzy 60s motel vibe. And the fact that the Mendeleev complex is dedicated to the care and research of a large AI construct, as well as the further testing of robots and androids, does remind me of GLaDOS, as well as her little companions, Atlas and Peabody. The more and more you work your way through the facility, the more and more Nora realizes you're going to overwrite her core program and reset her back to factory specs. To prevent this, Nora tells P3 that she has knowledge of his dead wife, and she'll tell him all he wants to know, so long as he gets rid of Dr. Lebedev and lets her take control of the facility, and you know what, maybe the entire U.S.S.R. for that matter. So, keeping in tune with the fact that P3 is extremely dense and easily led astray, he goes to confront Dr. Lebedev, and Dr. Lebedev's like, hey man, I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't know what your problem is, but I'll just patch you straight through to Dr. Sekhenov and you guys can hash it out yourself. So, you get on the phone to Sekhenov and he tells you, look, everything you heard is true. We can hash it out, we can talk it out, and you know what? take a long vacation, I'll give you all the notes that you really want on your wife. It won't bring her back, but maybe it'll make you feel better and we can sweep this entire thing under the rug. Just go fix Nora and you can go take your vacation. So, you do just that. You take a long elevator ride all the way down to her core consciousness and start putting in the BDs to rewrite her program. Just as you're about to finish, Nora activates her trap card, a large electromagnetic storm that's about to kill the player, but the Ballerina twins come in at the last minute to save you, holding off the storm with their, I don't know, their atomic powers. Anyway, you deal with a boss fight, put the last of the cores in, and rewrite Nora's core consciousness. She's back to normal. Well, not the normal you know, like an actual normal. And Sekhenov gives you your PTO. You get a pat on the head from the Ballarinas, get called a good boy, and get to go on your way. This entire adventure was pretty superfluous. It's not completely pointless, it is a fun adventure, and it's a good way to learn lore, even if it's in a weird diagonal way about the world Atomic Heart inhabits. That's the only way you learn about Nora, how she operates, as well as how Dr. Lebedev and some of the other scientists operate within the research facilities. I kinda just wish it was an actual conclusion to the joke ending, because that's what it is. It's the joke ending, where you give up the game. Maybe just have, like, P3 sipping Mai Tais on the beach at the very end of the game. I don't know.
Sugar do 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 do. Honey honey do 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 do.
The next DLC is Trapped in Limbo. This picks up after the canonical ending of the game, where you confront Dr. Sekhenov and Charles takes over the world. Once P3 falls to the ground catatonic in the canonical ending, he is trapped in limbo, just as the title says, and he has to work his way out of his coma to get back to the real world. This is pretty different. We've got to skate around on candy highways. Let's give it a go. Alright, let's skip ahead. So the next DLC is the Fish Under the Sea, the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. P3 finally wakes up from his catatonic state right next to his dead robot wife. Looking her over, you're actually able to upload part of her consciousness to your Power Glove. That's actually where Charles was stored in the base game. You leave the morgue and, well, Charles has really wrecked up the place. Now we are in full Bioshock territory. Society has fallen, buildings have collapsed, havoc in the streets, it's a total mess. Everything is on fire. It's kind of awesome, honestly. Ekaterina tells P3 that the only way they can solve this is if they find the beta connectors. You know, those rings that P3 threw away in the base game. What a dummy. In your journeys, you encounter Granny Zinnia again, and she wants to kill P3. Again. The more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess. The only thing that prevents you from getting a full brain shower is the fact that Ekaterina speaks up and tells her that she is alive in some way, shape, or form, and no, her son-in-law is not working with Charles. Learning that her daughter's been turned into an AI construct and her son-in-law is still a half-wit goon really breaks her heart, but these two are the only chance we have at defeating Charles, so we gotta figure it out from here. It's probably a hopeless quest to track down the rings, but if they are anywhere, they were probably dredged up by the Triton facility at the bottom of Lake Azure. This is the underwater research facility that you got a peek of when you went to go meet Filatova down at the Ministry of Consequences. Well, time to take another bathysphere down. The Triton complex is pretty similar to the Mendeleev complex and the Kazakhstan facility, though because it's underwater, it is a lot more visually interesting in my opinion. There's underwater walkways, lots of domed ceilings, lots of glass so you can see the exterior. It is very similar to Rapture, but it's, you know, a lot cleaner and a lot friendlier in the grand scheme of things. Except for these crab people that you encounter.
Crab people, taste like crab, talk like people, crab people.
There's also all these little cybermats around, which I didn't know Doctor Who was involved in this, and then of course there's a whole bunch of robots going berserk. They're mostly just underwater variants of the ones you've already encountered. During all of this underwater nonsense, you do get a little bit of time to get to know your robot wife. Ekaterina starts out fairly subdued and aloof in-game, and I think this is because she realizes P3 has no memory of her or their life together, so she's not really getting her hopes up. But once you get past that first major hurdle, she really starts opening up, and I do believe this is because it's the first time in a long time she's actually been able to talk to somebody. It's not explicitly stated how, but it's definitely implied that something in the Ballerina's operating systems kept Ekaterina's personality completely subdued. She was aware of the situation and aware of everything the Ballerinas did, but had absolutely no control. But now that she's free from the Ballarinas, she really has to find her own agency and grapple with her own self-identity. Early on in the DLC, Ekaterina provides a pretty great parallel for her situation, comparing herself to the Invisible Man. Whether that's the H.G. Wells original book or the James Whale movie doesn't really matter. The point stands that she's really having to grapple with the cognitive dissonance of being an entity, being an individual with no real body, not even a tangible one. And it is kind of driving her a little mad, though we don't really expand upon that other than a few little jokes in-game. Depending on your dialogue choices, you can still tell there is some emotional connection between P3 and Ekaterina that they're trying to rekindle, even if it's going to take some time. During your domestic life aquatic, you get to meet up with other survivors of the robot apocalypse. There's YouTuber man Kyle Hill, who makes a cameo here as Scientist Man.
Hello, it's me, Scientist Man.
There's the Hunter, a gruff survivalist expert, and then there's Nastia. She takes care of the dolphins. By the way, there's talking dolphins in this. Actually, a good part of the DLC involves you just hanging out with dolphins, so hope you like dolphins. Once you're done playing with the dolphins, you have to deal with a few special deliveries that have just arrived at the Triton facility. One of the special deliveries is the body of an android Ballerina, sent down by Granny Zinnia to get Ekaterina back into the fight. Though understandably being stuck in the cold, unfeeling shell of the Ballerina really perturbs and disturbs her. The other package you have to deal with is Simuldelkin, a robotics project created by Dr. Lebedev and put under the care of YouTuber man Kyle Hill. Yeah, I haven't really mentioned it at this point. Dr. Lebedev keeps getting name-dropped here. He's one of the major people opposing Charles along with Granny Zinnia. He also has some extensive knowledge of Ekaterina and P3's past as military operatives, and is using that to his advantage. You get Simuldelkin up and running, and he's much like Nora, an all-in-one weapons manufacturing depot and repair bay, as well as a robotics and engineering plant. Basically, he can do anything and everything, and genuinely really looks like Hedonism Bot from Futurama.
Let us cavort like the Greeks of old. You know the ones I mean.
Now that Simuldelkin's up and running, our heroes have a fighting chance, as he's able to get P3 and Ekaterina in sync with each other. That way she can be his full AI companion. Now that P3 and Ekaterina are fully drift compatible, they can cancel the apocalypse and start fighting kaiju, which actually isn't totally inaccurate. But before we get there, we still have to find the beta connectors. They're still somewhere out in the middle of Lake Azure, so we gotta get some friendly dolphins on the case. Meanwhile, our intrepid crew of heroes are trying to commandeer a submarine and escape the facility. They're just about to make it, and P3's right behind them until a sea serpent bursts through the opening. See, I told you there'd be a kaiju battle. After a very, very tedious boss fight, P3 is at the end of his rope. It seems like all hope is lost and he's about to be eaten by a mechanical monster until one of the Ballarinas bursts through the glass ceiling. She's here to rescue her husband. Ekaterina got into the robot, just like Shinji. Ekaterina in her robot body comforts P3 after his life and death tussle, and Johnny on the spot Dolphin here comes in tow with the rings. It looks like we're gonna make our escape to the surface and live happily ever after, and that is actually kind of how the story ends, at least so far. We finish the DLC by looking out to the sunset and vowing to fight Charles another day. It's a pretty peachy keen ending, and we don't know where it'll lead from here as the fourth DLC has not been released. It just kind of wraps up in too clean of a bow, if you ask me. I think one of the major problems is kind of Ekaterina's characterization here. She goes from prickly to self-actualizing and accepting the situation, which is fine in some respects, but I kind of feel like it takes away from her character as well as P3's character. They're just both fine with her being in a sexy robot body. I guess I'd be fine too if I had a buxom robot wife, but it feels kind of disingenuous, and it feels like it kind of goes against her character. She even talks about how she hated being split into the Ballarinas and it made her feel trapped. Maybe it would have been too dour of a conclusion, but I think it would have been much more interesting if we focused on P3's character and how he has to deal with the fact that Ekaterina is dead. She's not coming back, and any chance he has for revenge against Sekhenov has long since passed. He has to deal with the problem as it stands now. And I do think you could have had one of the Ballarinas AI be a companion and be an ally. It just would have been much more interesting to see how P3 has to come to grips with the fact that no matter how similar or different that AI construct is, it's not his wife. She's gone. Maybe that would have been a little too derivative of Minerva's Den, the Bioshock 2 DLC, where we deal with Charles Milton Porter and his obsession and creation Rodin, the Rapture Central Computing System, and how he used that to fill the void left behind by his dead wife. Might have been derivative, but hey, if you're gonna steal from something, you might as well steal from something great. For all intents and purposes, we'll leave the video game there for now. Maybe I'll make a follow-up when DLC 4 comes out, but until then, let's take a look at the merchandise.
Barks Root Beer has acquired a huge inventory of really neat stuff! Authentic Soviet pins, like new Mayday flags, Communist Party favors, and more!
Most of this shit isn't worth jack ever since the Soviet Union fell, but I still think it's pretty cool. If I remember correctly, this is a hat pin for a Soviet Navy captain. It looks pretty neat in my opinion, has really great detail work. Too bad it's made of complete garbage. Like I said, Soviet Union's notoriously resource poor. And then I don't know how you would have gotten this pin back in the day, but this is from the Soviet Science Ministry and celebrates 50 years of scientific achievements in nuclear study. Nothing crazy's ever happened with the Soviet Union and the nuclear program, that's for damn sure.
Nuclear. It's pronounced nuclear.
Whatever.
Nuclear.
Oh, merchandise for Atomic Heart, not Soviet paraphernalia. Actually, I don't know if there is any merchandise for Atomic Heart. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't know if there's any official merchandise for Atomic Heart. There is some pretty interesting unlicensed toys, though. These are the Atomic Twins from Wiki Toys, and much like Alcena Dimitrescu that we covered previously, these are unlicensed third-party action figures. These girls are 6-inch scale and are meant to pair with Mafex, Marvel Legends, G.I. Joe Classified, Black Series, all that stuff. And these spent a long time in development hell, so much so that I thought I was going to get scammed, but hey, here they are. These two Iron Maidens are very minimalist and very bare in their design. While they do have a fair amount of sculpted mechanical detail, their overall appearance is very minimalistic, but it does lead them to being very chic. That minimalism goes to their head sculpts as well, however, it is broken up, as you do have the large Soviet-style star on their forehead, as well as the Gretchen Fessua hairstyle, which, at least in my opinion, does feel very emblematic of old-school Europe. Now, of course, the Stark faceplate does make me think of my boy, Cobra Commander, and it kind of makes me wish that these girls had a lot of chrome on them, but maybe I'm just projecting. But I don't think so, because when I first saw these girls in the marketing material for Atomic Heart, the first thing I thought of was one particular artist, Hajime Sorayama. While he might not be a household name, you've definitely seen his art, as it was used in a lot of marketing campaigns in the past 50 years, and is also very prevalent in the pages of heavy metal. In fact, I think there is exactly one piece of art that these girls were heavily inspired by. Not that one, not that one, not that one either, definitely not that one right there. All the way down to the little gold crop top jacket. Look, there's nothing wrong with being deliberately derivative. This isn't some sort of call-out post or gotcha. Look, some of my favorite creators, Hirohiko Araki and George Lucas, have built their entire careers off of their inspiration. I just think it's very interesting that this artist's work has gone on to affect a very mainstream AAA game and their character designs. Now, of course, because these are boutique action figures, they have a bevy of interchangeable hands. You have flats and gesticulating. While they're all sculpted well, I do wish they had paint applications. Now, while they don't have any trigger finger hands, they do have holding things hands, so they can give them swords, spears, pole arms, anything like that. Additionally, you get a specialized pinching hand, and this is for an included key. What is this mysterious key for? Is it for a treasure? Is it the secret of the Italian mafia? Is it for a turtle? No, none of the above. In-game, the key is just there to open a car. It's a little lackluster, and while it's sculpted well, marketing material gave the key a lot more intrigue than it really deserves. The last interchangeable sets of hands deal with their in-game attacks. See, they have very long claws that can be deployed at a moment's notice. While they're sculpted very well, they're also made of a soft material, so they bend very easily. These ladies also have one more major interchangeable component, and honestly, there's no dancing around the subject.
What are these, watermelons? This is a stage, babe. It's not a patch. See ya.
To say that these robots are robust is an understatement, okay? These figures are so incredibly busty, they go against what we see on the in-game models of the Ballerina twins. Yeah, this got a lot of attention and a lot of eyes on the toys, but to compensate for the inaccuracy, Wiki Toys provided an interchangeable upper torso, and swapping out this piece is difficult, so much so I'd actually call it a pain in the ass. The figure does look more proportionate, and the jacket sits better, but with how difficult it was to swap, it doesn't feel like it was worth it. I felt like I was stressing joints. I felt like I was cracking paint finishes. It didn't feel good. Wiki Toys should have either made this the standard or just not included it at all. Look, that is my biggest complaint. And you know what? To be fair, I'm easily distracted by their headlights. See, they include a magnetic piece, which if you wave it over their head, actually makes an LED illuminate the red star on their forehead. I have never seen a magnet-activated light before, and honestly, it's kind of mesmerizing.
Folks, these robots are hot.
You can also remove the red plastic star from their forehead and replace it with a couple of different blast effects. You have one short laser beam and then one large, very stylized blast. Blast effects are really hit and miss with me. Sometimes they look like blobs of nothing, like the War for Cybertron Siege and Earthrise effects, but sometimes the more stylized they are, the more interesting they are, like the JoJo blast effects. These fall more on the stylized side. I like the very geometric shape of the large blast effect especially, and it just looked very visually compelling and interesting. The last interchangeable part you have for the portrait sculpt is this very long twisting horn. While it looks dangerous and ready for offense, it's really for the way they interface in-game, which is intimate to say the least. After they're done interfacing, you get this large cog-like key, which I'm not exactly sure what it's for. I've played the game a few times and I've watched the cutscene. I think maybe it has something to do with cold fusion, but smarter YouTubers than I can explain that. As an accessory, it looks neat. The last major accessory they have are these attachable heel extensions. Now, in-game, they're meant for key interfacing, kind of like the large spike that comes out of RoboCop's wrist, and much like that spike, it's very blatantly meant to stab people. You just add these attachments to the underside of the heels, and in function, they really shift the silhouette from looking like ballerina flats to pumps, which actually helps quite a bit for their shelf presence, because in-game, they're very tall and pretty massive, so it's nice to have them tower over your other figures. And they do truly have fantastic shelf presence. They're chic and they're eye-catching, and have wonderful posability. The full suite of modern articulation, and then some. You can get them into a lot of interesting action poses. I mean, I'd certainly hope so. They're not wearing very much. It's not like the other robots you see on this channel that have a full car or jet hanging off their back and still have to strike a pose.
Strike a pose, there's nothing to it.
So as a video game and as a story, I do like Atomic Heart quite a bit. It is obviously very derivative of other works, but that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to take inspiration from things you like and make your own unique little story. However, I don't think the comparisons to Bioshock are completely unfounded. It is very, very derivative of and fits squarely within the man, the lighthouse, and the city motif set forth by Infinite. However, despite that, it is still very unique. It has its own unique aesthetic, its own unique story narrative, as well as its own unique, very strange, poorly translated sense of humor. That sounds like a backhanded compliment, but it's not. I like that. It makes Atomic Heart very distinct and very unique in its own way. It's very uniquely Russian. I can't deny that whatsoever. And it does just happen to activate all the neurons in my brain that say, give me more Bioshock. And I'm okay with that, honestly. And I think the major takeaway that I will have from Atomic Heart, no matter what, is going to be the Ballarinas. The Ballarinas are super interesting. They're very evocative designs and very eye-catching. Despite how much I like them and I think they're interesting, I don't think they'll reach the icon status of the Big Daddy Bouncer from the original Bioshock. Unfortunately, just due to the internet culture at large, they've been pigeonholed into flavor of the week territory, along with other video game girls like Alcina Dimitrescu. I mean, yes, they're very sexy. They're buxom, curvaceous robots and leotards. Of course they're eye-catching in that respect. I just think that you can keep in mind that they can both be very sexy and horrific aberrations of science. Both can be true at the same time, and both are interesting. Now, when it comes to the figures themselves, the Wiki Toys Atomic Twins are fantastic. They are very niche boutique toys, but they are beautiful, and they have wonderful shelf presence. If there's one thing to be made from Atomic Heart, it truly is the twins. I don't care if there's ever a P3 figure, and if there is, I ain't buying it. I already got the twins. That's good enough for me. Now, I'll tell you this, though. I didn't buy the twins because of Atomic Heart's narrative. I just bought them because they were cool. The rule of cool overrides all. And honestly, I'm not going to have an Atomic Heart shelf the same way I do a Bioshock Infinite shelf. The Atomic Heart twins are going to be hanging out with my G.I. Joe classified 6-inch figures. And honestly, without the context of the game's narrative and the character of Ballerina, they're just very cool, carte blanche evil robots, no different than the Cobra Bats. Once you get the context of the game, though, there's a little bit more underneath the surface. Obviously, they're lethal escorts, but there's also a quiet melancholy to them. They're almost statues in sorrow. I don't normally record outros for these videos, but considering this one's so different than normal, I figured it's warranted. I just want to say thank you to anybody who's watching this, anybody who's stuck around, and everybody who's subscribed. All of my videos are completely improv, by the way. I don't really write scripts for these, sometimes bullet points just to keep things straight. And this video is no different, it just happened to be an hour long because I really wanted to talk about a video game I like. It's probably going to be a long time before I make another hour-long video on something I like, but you never know. In the meantime, though, we'll talk about Transformers, G.I. Joe, Mask, vintage toys, new toys, all that good stuff. Just keep in tune and we'll see where we go from here.